So I'm a little late to the party on this one, and everyone has been talking about this album, but I'm going to anyway because it's really just that good. Now the album I'm talking about is of course Behemoth's release at the beginning of this month, The Satanist. Now, a little background on the band. Behemoth are a Polish extreme metal band formed in the early 1990s. And the important thing to realize about Behemoth is that they really started out as a mayhem, Bathory type European black metal band in the early 90s. I mean, look at this. They've got the paint and the black and white picture, and they're even using the same font as Bathory. Throughout the 2000s, Behemoth progressed into an increasingly more and more death metal oriented sound, and by their last release in 2009, Evangelion, I think I'm pronouncing that right, most would simply consider them a death metal band. And this new release has been getting a lot of buzz, as it is Behemoth's first album in 5 years. I believe that is the longest gap they've had between albums their entire career. Like I said, they started out as a black metal band, but merged into a more death metal sound, and I think you can really see the combination of those two worlds coming together wonderfully on this album. One of the reasons that I like this album so much is that it hasn't conformed to the sort of standards of death metal in recent years. It doesn't worry about subgenre, whether it's technical, melodic death, or whatever. Behemoth simply set out to create an amazing heavy metal record, and that's exactly what they did. Another thing that I like about this album is that it once again defies convention in that it's not particularly technical or fast or progressive in an era when that seems to be the definite trend for extreme metal, and especially death metal. The guitars aren't octatonic scale riffing at 300 BPM, the drums aren't blast beats for 5 minutes as fast as you possibly can. And that sort of more basic sound is a breath of fresh air in a time when death metal is increasingly more and more technical and faster and more brutal, as it were. So anyway, on to the actual music. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the guitar work on this album, which I was thoroughly impressed with. The riffs, like I said, aren't the fast, legato, up and down the neck scales that we've all become so used to in death metal in recent years. And in fact, throughout the album, especially on one of my favorite songs, the first track on the album, Blow Your Trumpets, Gabriel, the same riff essentially repeats throughout the song. It's slow and simple, yet it really captures the tone and conveys the feel of the album, and I think the feel Behemoth is going for much better than a speedy, ridiculous riff would. Once again on this album, Behemoth is not concerned with death metal conventions, and that these riffs really are just sort of great regardless of genre. Some of these riffs you listen to on, like I mentioned, Blow Your Trumpets, Gabriel, and the title track, The Satanist, would feel just as much as home on a doom metal album, like a sleep album, as much as they do on a death metal album, which I think shows the kind of versatility that I think Behemoth has really shown on this record. Excuse me. Behemoth has made an interesting use of other types of instruments. For example, they use a lot of horn sections on this album, which I think sound incredible and unfortunately are neglected in heavy metal a lot. I mean, when you look at orchestral instruments, you usually see a lot of strings, you know, cellos, double basses, bowed instruments, things like that. I think the horns really provide a deep sort of gravity that really helps pull the album together. I also use a almost angelic vocal chorus on some of the songs. For example, the last track on the album has a melodic harmony of several singers behind the main singer's gruff death metal vocals. And that chorus section really gives the album a change of pace, and something the listener definitely is not expecting. They also provide a sort of change of pace on the song In the Absence of Light, where it sort of goes out from this big, heavy death metal verse into a spoken word Polish interlude with acoustic guitars in the background, and it certainly isn't expected, and it certainly provides an interesting, unique tone to that song in particular, which is once again one of my favorites on this album. I'd like to talk about the lead singer's vocals. And I really appreciate the vocals on this album because they do have that gruffness, the sort of rough sound that we're used to in death metal, but at the same time, he's not just trying to sound as mean and nasty as loud as he can for 5 minutes. At points it has almost a distressed sound, which is very reminiscent of one of my other favorite extreme metal bands at the moment, Karak Angrim, who I think use their vocals much to their benefit in their own music. And the lyrics on this album, much as the title suggests, focus around biblical themes, Satan, kind of what you expect to be run-of-the-mill extreme metal subject matter. But I think Behemoth approaches it in a way that it's sort of different, and it's not just the same sort of sacrileging we've been seeing in heavy music for the last 20 years. And to conclude, my favorite tracks on this album probably have to be, like I mentioned, the opening track, Blow Your Trumpets, Gabriel, the title track, The Satanist, and the second to last track, I believe, In the Absence of Light. All three of those are some of my favorite death metal songs in recent years in general, not just on this album. So finally, if you are a fan of death metal or extreme metal or black metal or whatever, I strongly urge you to listen to this album if you haven't already. And if you're not, then honestly, this album is not a bad place to start if you have any interest in listening to those genres. So, in conclusion, this is my favorite album of 2014 so far. I know we're only a month and a half in, but I'm thoroughly impressed with Behemoth, and I guess I'll end the video there.